Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome to this weekend segment of Subtle Asian Voices, also known as SAV. My name is Tiffany, and I am your host for today's segment. We're so lucky to be joined today by Jasmine. She may be familiar to you if you've been following us the last couple of weeks, actually, because we brought Jasmine back from a previous live stream. It was held on July 18th, and it was actually a panel of female dating perspectives. We actually got a lot of positive reception with Jasmine's story, and so we're bringing her back today to kind of dig a little bit deeper and for her to really share her perspectives on a very poignant relationship in her life. So I'd like to introduce Jasmine.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back. Excited to dive into that part of my life and share with you all today. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being open and vulnerable with us, and really sharing your story. All right, so I did also mention that that's the topic of today's interview. Before we go into the actual content, wanted to go over some housekeeping and logistics. So if you're joining us for the first time on this live stream, you'll actually notice that we have a chat feature. It's a live chat. So if you'd like to engage with us during this conversation at any point, feel free to leave comments, feel free to leave questions, and we'll be following along live time. And if we're able to answer your question, we'll bring it in if there's a good point in us for us to do that. So we'll just get started. So Jasmine, can you give us an update on this particular relationship for our viewers who have not seen the original live stream, which you premiered on?
Yeah, so like you said, in the previous live stream, I was a part of a panel of ladies who shared some of our dating stories. And I just happened to have one of mine that was about the one who got away. And so just here to share more about that relationship and how, I've processed that information and how I've been able to move on from that, and just excited to share with you all.
Great. So when you mean the one that got away, can you kind of explain what that means for you?
For me, and for the next hour, I have a lot of details to share with you guys. But he was the first love for me. I was the first love for him. And we very vividly kind of planned out our future. Our families were really close. And it just, in hindsight, it felt like the wrong timing. We were very young, had all these dreams and these hopes that just didn't come to fruition. And just grappling with that reality as you go from a kid to adolescence to young adult and now to adulthood, more or less to adulthood. It's been an evolution of the person that I am, the person that he is, and just that reality that we came out of. I think for both of us, for a very long time, we felt like we were each other's the one that got away. So understanding that we both felt that way also added a level of immensity to it that was hard to let go.
Okay. So maybe you can back up a little bit. You can start in the beginning. Can you paint us a picture of this man for us, right? Like, I've never met him. Our viewers don't know this person. And then go into kind of like what that relationship was like, just from the very beginning, and however much you want to share.
So we started dating when I was 15, sophomore in high school. He was a grade above me. Like I said, we were each other's first love. But what made this relationship felt like it slipped away from us was that even though we were so young, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, of course, at that time, no one outside of our relationship could tell us any different, right? Like, we knew what we knew, we felt what we felt, and no one could be like, well, you're just kids, you grow out of it, et cetera, et cetera. So we strongly felt that no matter what life threw our way, we'd always find a way back to each other. All of that felt so real and so tangible that, like I said, grasping the reality of us not ending up together just didn't feel right. And also, we're both super family oriented. So we were very involved in each other's families. His parents felt like mine and mine to him. And I think also relatable, when you have that level of connection, it adds an additional layer of it being so hard to let go. So after high school, well, first he graduated. he graduated, but he stayed in our hometown. So really it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't too much of a change. I would continue going to school, and in our leisure time, we would meet up. But when I graduated, I left for college, a lot changed. And for those of you who are listening, this was not too far back in the day, but this is when, you know, we did have cell phones, but you had to wait until 9 p.m. for the free
Okay.
minutes. And, you know, you're limited a month to like 250 texts or whatever it is that you could afford. So constant communication was not an easy thing. It was very limited. And it wasn't exactly affordable to have a webcam and to also have a solid internet connection that you can, you know, connect with each other all the time.
That's
Nowadays, you can
true.
just, you know, walk down the street, FaceTime somebody, and be like, "Hey, how's your day doing?" That that,
Yeah.
that didn't happen at the time. And at least for me, you know, 2 hour drive from city to city back when you were 18 and 19 years old just felt so much longer than it does now. You know,
Oh,
as an
is that how far away you went for college?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
You know, it sounds crazy right now because 2 hours is so short. It really just flies by like that. And I think it's also, as an adult, I've traveled a lot for work, you know, different cities across the country. That's like not such a big deal. But at the time, me going through a full college workload, just finding that extra time to travel, and then to
Mhm.
put my studies to the side to spend time to get that quality time together, it was really hard to figure out. So, you know, we just didn't know how to navigate through those changes that were happening to us so quickly.
Okay, so if you can back up actually a little bit. So you started dating him when you were, in the middle of high school, and then he went away for college, and not much changed. But then
Hmm.
you went away for college, and you guys were still dating, and
Hmm.
then you guys found that it was very difficult
Yeah,
to do that. Okay, and
yeah.
then what happened?
And then, you know, we broke up my freshman year of college. It just became too much.
Mhm.
um, you know, we couldn't keep up with each other. It was too difficult. Time constraints, you know. I We both, but more so me, was confronted with the fact that I was discovering and living this new life that didn't have him living alongside me on a regular basis. You know, I'm in a different town, I'm meeting new people, I'm having different experiences, I'm away from my family. And it was challenging trying to find a way to communicate that. I think there was a sense of guilt for having living parts of my life that didn't include him. And
Oh, okay.
it was just very difficult trying, you know, finding a way to communicate that, you know, that wouldn't include anything that, you know, I'm living this part and it doesn't include you. It doesn't mean I have forgotten about you, but you know, he didn't always understand all these things that I was a part of. You know, I was
Okay.
involved in different orgs that took up my time outside of the classroom. I pledged a sorority that also took my time when I was outside the classroom, but then also took time away from him and from us, especially on the weekends. You know, all these things I felt like was part of the college experience.
Mhm.
And he didn't necessarily have that in his experience. He didn't move away from home. He was still with his family. So it was just a lot of different dynamics that we didn't know how to navigate through.
Well, that happens though, right? Because I also
Yeah.
went away for college, and I feel like the lessons you learn, like moving away from home versus staying home at a community college, they're very different, and the experiences you have are different, right? So the experiences you go through also contribute to your learnings and how you choose to kind of, I don't want to say mature, but how you develop and you kind of view
Mhm.
things moving forward. So that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
And, you know, again, with their one factor being already being hard to communicate physically, right? Because you had the limited time and the limited text, just the physicality of being able to communicate, but then also trying to find the right words and the right way to say certain things. You know, for whatever reason it was, we tended to avoid a lot of difficult conversations. Like we knew it was difficult. So once we reached that point and we didn't know how to really communicate what ended up being was that, you know, for a while, saying the I love yous made it okay until it couldn't anymore because, you know, you would constantly reach or we would constantly reach that wall where it's like, okay, well, what do we talk about now? Because he was doing his own thing, I was doing my own thing, and then when we got together, it was just difficult.
So it sounds like you said the basis of the relationship was really the emotional connection, right? The love
Yeah.
piece. And that's actually really interesting because in our chat here, there is a comment that I wanted to bring in. It's pretty relevant. So this viewer says, having been in a 10-year relationship that started in high school, I've had similar thoughts about how she was the one that got away. At the same time, I've also wondered how much of it was puppy love. What are your thoughts on how much of yours was puppy love and being your first love versus like true love?
Yeah, I think initially very much of it was puppy love, but we did have a lot of concrete conversations about what kind of future we wanted for each other. Starting a family, talking about how many kids, and like I said, we were so involved in each other's families, activities, and milestones and life changes that it already felt so real. It wasn't like we were living in our own world. And I shared this with you, Tiff, and also I think with the SAV group as well. But we were pretty serious. We didn't share this with a lot of our families because we were so aware of the fact that at that age, we were young, like 18, 19. And even now looking back, I'm realizing that we were really super young, right? But before I left for college, like he actually did propose to me. And that felt so real for us. We didn't make any big announcement because it was something we wanted to keep to ourselves. It was a commitment that we made to each other. And that was enough for us, so and I think that added a layer. I mean, some people, for whatever their experiences, and it's different for every relationship, every couple, they probably would relate that to like a promise ring or just a promise. But for us, it was very real. And I took that with me to college, and that's why we tried so hard to make it work, but we kept hitting these walls. So yeah, in the beginning, it was very, very much so puppy love, I would say, but then it's evolved into so much more. We did, we broke up when I was in freshman of college, and then we went on to date other people. But every time we were single, we somehow just naturally found our way back to each other. And so there was this unspoken thing that, let's let each other go through the motions of growing up and having these experiences. And when we're ready, we will find our way back to each other. So, just having that as a mentality was why for so long and for all of those years, we just, whenever it didn't work out, it felt like, darn, it slipped out of our hands again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can give some perspective to our viewers too. You said it, it's been so long and like so many years and, breakups, like what, can you describe what that was?
Yeah. So, we broke up a handful of times during the time that I was in undergrad. And we both, at various points managed to move on and date other people. On both sides, long-term relationships that we really genuinely tried our best to make it work with that relationship. Whenever that did happen, we would step back from each other. Really, we didn't keep in constant communication whenever that happened, out of respect for, each other's new lives and each other's new relationships. But for more than a decade, right? So if you consider, we started when I was 15. I think I for me personally, and I can't tell in complete detail for him, but up until I was like 28, 29, I kind of lived with that concept that, yeah, he's the one that got away. So for more than a decade, whether we were together or not, like I said, we stayed involved in each other's lives in various ways. But mostly it was the significant ways that made it so, that just made everything so permanent. For example, when I was in college, I was there for his dad when, his dad went through a heart attack and underwent bypass surgery, I would travel home a couple times during the week. And granted, this is when I had a full college, coursework, just to sit by his bedside at night because he, like I said, he growing up with his family, he was like a dad to me. So
Mm.
we didn't know whether he would make it or not, and I didn't want to live with that regret of not being there and just being supportive. Whenever I came home, I would stop by his mom's shop just to say hi. Oftentimes, without him even knowing, a part of me just wanted them to know that I hadn't forgotten about them, even though we weren't together. I still wanted them to know that they still meant a lot to me and that I'm still here if they ever need anything. And it
Mhm.
was the same on both sides. When I was away, if my parents needed anything, they knew that they could call on him. They didn't. Most times they really didn't, unless it was like true emergency. My mom at one point also was in the ICU for health reasons, and I was out of town, and he was there just to be supportive. So it was those significant parts of life. Like we weren't there on a regular basis throughout the
Mm.
decade or more or less, but it was just that undertone of knowing that we would be there when it mattered, right? And just letting go of that connection, it was just difficult every single time we tried.
It sounds like it wasn't just an emotional connection with him, but it was tied to his family,
Hmm.
right? You guys were
Yeah.
both so embedded in each other's lives that um, I can imagine that might be difficult to cut off versus like if you didn't know his family.
Yeah, yeah. It's and like I said, family just means so much to us in general, right? And so again, it added that extra layer that just made it more complicated, but while also making it more real. When we're talking about earlier puppy love, right? It made that reality, that future that we had painted when we were in high school, so real. It just made it harder to let go.
Wow, I can't imagine having that sort of emotional connection with someone for it's 15, almost 14
Yeah, yeah.
decade plus, like half my life. Do you think that maybe this emotional tie during that time when you were, not with him, but you mentioned that you had some relationships during that time too. Do you think that maybe your emotional connection with him and his family affected your other relationships, like in any way, even if it's subconsciously?
I would say so. There's a lot of layers to a lot of things, but this one is
Go
one
for
of them.
it.
Yeah, I would say that no, it didn't affect my relationships because I can confidently say that I did genuinely put so much of myself into making the relationships after him work, at least as much as I knew how during that time in my life, right? Like I said, looking back, I still felt like up until maybe the past recent couple years, I was still very much a kid. Even after you graduate college, you think, yes, I'm an adult. I'm going to go, get my, big girl job and live my own and start my career. It kind of feels like you're still a kid in hindsight, right? So,
Mm.
and I say that because at the time it was just trying to process so much information and so many emotions. And at my core, and I say this now just unapologetically, that I am a hopeless romantic. But back then I wouldn't admit it because I sort of felt like I was asking too much or expecting too much. But yeah, I was
Oh.
in relationships where I genuinely thought that they could be the guy that I would end up marrying, until of course that ended up not being the case. um, Now, I also recognize that I would be totally remiss if I didn't acknowledge that it may have affected me subconsciously. Of course, that's a big impactful part of my life. But I think for many of us at that age, we didn't know any better. So thoughts like that we were more or less pushed to the side and regarded as something that most people just go through in life, right? Because the concept of the one that got away, you see it in movies, you hear about it in songs, you read about it in the books. And like I said, that concept of having someone who got away, I recognize that it wasn't special to my experience. It was more of, I think, a reality of love and life. And I just regarded it as something that it is what it is. I feel like most people went through it, and it's not something that you want to feel necessarily.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It's a part of life and a part of learning and a part of, just your natural stages of love.
I wonder, like, if people experience, the one that got away type of relationship, if they appreciate their next one, just so much more because they feel like at a loss, right? At a deficit at some point, like that could have been the one, but then, or maybe that person thought they were the one and, they just didn't end up that. I wonder if that, impacts like following relationships too. Do you think it has for you? Like, do you think that this relationship, or how has this relationship really affected you in relationships today, like following that?
Yeah, I'd have to say that the relationships following, I don't think I was on any I don't think that I was influenced in the fact that, okay, with a mindset of going in like this could be the one, so don't mess it up. And not in that sense.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and perhaps I compartmentalized it. I took and I saw that part, and that was something I went through. I want to start fresh. I want to, give it my all and do everything. But for those who do know me, all the relationships that I have, all the guys that I've been with, they're all very different from each other. So, I don't think that I carried anything to, the new relationships. But the one that got away, that relationship, it just taught me so much. Actually, it taught me more so in recent years, meaning the last few years, as I've grown to be more conscious, to put in the work, to reflect on how my past has shaped me and affected me. And I would say overall as an adult, I'm just more comfortable accepting, my pitfalls, my shortcomings, all the things that I wish would have worked out, but didn't. And the difference now is I can understand why those things didn't work out. Back then, it was just a matter of, okay, it didn't work out. You just have to accept it because that's life, and it is what it is. But in retrospect and in reflecting on all of those experiences, now I have a layer of understanding why, right? I know more about myself. Perhaps I've learned more about that individual as well. And to understand why it didn't match up is just so much different than accepting the fact, accepting it as a matter of fact. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you mind sharing like what an example where you were able to kind of rationalize why something happened?
Yeah. Let me see. Well, I would say
curveball here.
I know. No, it's good. I would say that in my reflections, when I was going through the motions of living that specific time in my life, again, it really is just, it was a lot of information to process, and to throw emotions and feelings on top of that. It's just not something that's easy to navigate, even for the most resilient individual. So, I shared this in the precursor episode with the panelists that I was able to let go of the concept of him being the one that got away when I met my true love, because I just had so much more clarity. Now I see, our relationship, my relationship now with my boyfriend, Nico, it just took me to another level. Like, and it sounds so cliche when I say it, but you hear it in the movies, like when it's easy, it's easy. Like this relationship is easy. Things make sense. And it gave me understanding to, again, really see why all my relationships in the past, including the one that didn't get away, didn't work out. A lot of the dynamics going through that motion felt forced. It felt forced because you had this mentality or just this frame of mind that, you painted this picture, so you do whatever it takes to get to that future.
Okay.
Like it just felt like you were forcing your way through it, as opposed to it feeling more natural, it just feeling like it belongs, if that makes any
I think I
sense.
understand that, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if part of it comes from us being Asian Americans, growing up here. My family's an immigrant family, and so I would say in some cases we're pretty traditional.
Mhm.
And so I had my life path drawn out for me, and so I tried to follow it. It sounds similar to kind of the expectations you're talking about, right? Like you have an image of what a relationship should be per your knowledge at that age, right? We're all a little bit naive when we're young, and so you try to stick to the map that you drew, but then somewhere along the way you realize, like, why am I following this? Am I following
Mhm.
it just because I drew it? Like, is there a better map that I should be following? Should I follow any map or just follow
Yeah.
energy?
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because our parents, being immigrant parents, right? We grow up seeing the dynamics of their relationship, and they're not perfect, but for better or for worse, our parents stay committed to each other, but we see all of these, whether it's minor or major, but we see all of these conflicts that they go through, and they've been managed, and they've been able to stay with each other through all of these conflicts. And it varies from healthy to unhealthy to like super toxic, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's a lot of it, I would say, and I would definitely preface that by say, no fault of their own. Our parents have gone through just so many life circumstances that are out of their control, so they did what they had to do, and they made the best of the situation. But I think that's also why going through the motions of a relationship that might have had an underlining unhealthy dynamic to it made it okay to still see a future with that person. Does that
Mm.
make yeah? And no relationships are perfect. You're always going to have conflict, but for me and that particular relationship, we always seem to be okay with avoiding conflict and the hard conversations. Like I said, we
Mm.
sort of relied on, okay, we love each other and we know that, and that's what's important. So as long as we love each other, everything will be okay. So we didn't
So
really have
con- the conflict never got resolved then, right? Because you guys would get to a conflict and then
yeah.
just be like, oh, I love you. And then you don't talk about the conflict
Yeah,
anymore.
I mean, there will be arguments, but there was never any real resolution. Again, like I said, we were kids.
Mm.
Um, a big part of that is we didn't know any better. Another part and dynamic of that is we also didn't have, maybe not necessarily the greatest examples to look up to no fault, again, to no fault of anybody, but we only knew what we knew. And so we would fight, and then we would, get tired of the fighting and kind of find some sort of common ground and be like, look, I love you. Can we just move on?
Mm.
And I think I would say a lot of relationships go through that ebb and flow, and maybe they get to a point where they can find a way to talk to each other out of that conflict, and I guess sort of level up to a next level of maturity that can then continue to take you through that. But some relationships, you can't push past through that for whatever reason it may be.
Well, when you say that though, I feel like I know people in relationships that rely on that commitment and love, right? Maybe they're
Mhm.
married or maybe they just really love each other. And that is how they deal with conflict, But how, I guess, do you think there's like danger in just iterating on that? How does that actually, well, how would it affect you if you were to continue in a
Yeah.
relationship and that was your way of resolving conflict?
Right. So I maybe specifically for my experience and in the examples that I see and in my parents, they would try to do their best to navigate and communicate through that conflict. And I know this because I was always the mediator.
I
Um,
can relate.
so I was there for every argument, every fight. It was always a okay, family meeting, everybody to the dining room table, and like, here's mom's side, here's dad's side, and let's talk it. Yeah, it it
That's
was
a lot. How old
it
were
is.
you when they did that?
Well, initially, my brother had that role, and then he went to college, and it was not as feasible. Although there, when it did get really bad, my my father, and I love him, but he would call my brother home from college
To mediate.
to mediate. But
Ooh,
again, and
that's a
then
lot.
yeah, and then his courses got harder. He got to grad school again, was not feasible. So I started getting deep into that maybe end of middle school, beginning of
Okay.
high, as the start of high school, you know. Um, and in hindsight, that's not healthy at all for a child.
You learn quick.
Yeah, you do. And, I think that's part of the resiliency that, we get from it. But the danger, at least for me and in what I experienced with that process for me was because my parents could never really reach a resolution where they both were in a peaceful place. It was always, okay, you win this time. It wasn't explicitly said that way. It wasn't like, okay, you
Right.
win, I give in, and next time I win, you give in. It was just, all right, well, we obviously aren't going to reach a common ground resolution. So it is what it is. Let's just agree to move forward. Like, I love you, hugging kisses, and we move on. Right. But, and I do know, and, I see it. They do genuinely love each other. My parents were high school sweethearts.
Oh,
And
were
now
you
that I'm
hoping to
actually,
be that too?
well, I don't think that I ever hoped to be that, but now that I'm saying it out loud, I don't,
Yeah.
now that I'm realizing that maybe subconsciously that stuck with me, that hopeless romantic piece of me was like, okay, well, my parents
Yeah.
could do it. And they lived through a war and they lived through all these losses and heartache. And, it makes mine and my relationship at the time just
A
seem
possibility.
very, yeah, and very, very manageable.
Mhm.
um,
Right.
but as I've gotten older and I've had more experiences, I would say my approach now towards conflict, and actually, let me take a step back. The reason why I think that there could be some dangers in that is when you're unable to reach a common ground where you both are at peace, right? Where you both are genuinely accepting the situation for what it is. If you're not taking that full acceptance, there's possibilities for resentment, whether
Okay.
you're aware of that or whether you're subconscious about that. And I saw that in my parents, you know, um, and it's more so my mom. I love her to death, but she would walk away and she'll say something under her breath, but she'd be like, "Yeah, we're good." And I'm like, "Okay." And you see that for your entire childhood, so you think it's normal. You think it's
Mhm.
okay, but if you take that and you imagine that over the years, and they've been together 38 years, you know um again, it's really not healthy to kind of harbor even the tiniest bit of resentment towards your partner just because you weren't able to find a common ground and move forward with that piece. And so as I've moved more in my life, my approach towards conflict, whether for a romantic relationship or even a platonic relationship with friends,
Mhm.
right, has also changed. I'm more mindful. I take my time to process what's happening, consider perspectives, because there's always more than one. And I would say, more importantly, your perspective isn't more important than the other person.
Mhm.
There's a reason why they see the things the way that they do, and to find the time to really understand why they see it that way, and find a way to explain to them why you see it your way. And this is for me, finding that common ground might not be easy, but when you reach it, it's just such a peaceful feeling, you know.
When you were saying that, my mind immediately went to empathy and patience, right? Like, I think if you're able to have those two pieces, and I'm not the most patient person, so I'm
Yeah.
not saying that I know how to do this, but if you're able to have both of those pieces with a person, even if you don't even if you don't agree, right, to whatever you're disagreeing about, if you're able to understand the other person's feelings and perspectives, I think that goes a really long way. And
Yeah.
that sounds like what you're kind of describing with all of your relationships, whether romantic or not.
Right. And I think, I believe that it is completely okay to agree to disagree. But I think, where there becomes a danger is when someone says they agree to disagree, but they don't really feel that way. They still feel like, no, I'm
Yeah.
right. I'm right. And I don't agree with what's happening, but this is the only way we can move forward. So whatever. And then those feelings, they don't, you don't realize it, but it stays harbored in you. And it's not something you feel on a day to day, but when that next conflict or that next argument comes up, it comes up like this. And, it becomes tenfold or whatever. And again, just navigating through so much information and so much hidden feelings that you even hide from yourself it's difficult.
Yeah. Then you're missing transparency there, right? If someone says
Yeah.
it's fine, but then it's not, like, how do you move forward with that?
Yeah.
How do you know if
Right.
it's real or not? So
Right.
because when someone says that, maybe half the time they're okay and half the time they're not okay.
Yeah.
I'm a literal person, so I need you to tell me, like, straight up as is.
Right. And the more that you tell people you're fine or you're okay, and I'm sure people in the audience are thinking of those memes that are like, I'm fine, but then the next slide is like the house is on fire, technically. The more that you say that to your partner, or just on the opposite side of whatever relationship it is, they can learn to become distrusting of what you say. And so that is something that can subtly change the dynamic over time.
Mhm.
They learn that what you're really saying isn't your truth. So they find their own way um, to grasp that reality, and to work around it. But it doesn't always, it doesn't always come to a resolution that either party wants.
Mhm. Have you ever done that, or have you had a partner that kind of said they were fine and weren't? And do
I
you
mean,
know
I think
why
all
people
of
do
us.
it?
I mean, yeah, I think all of us have gone through that, right? I mean, if I look back at my relationships in college, and even with the one that got away, I'm a person who I I'm independent, and I'm always the one who says, it's easier for me to control how I see the world and how I see things, because I can control myself, but I can't control you or anything around me. So, um, I, even though it's not fine, I will find a way to be fine.
Okay, that's a good.
I will find a way to be fine. Now, whether or not that ends up being the case, and I know that's a lot of pressure I put on myself, and I'm sure other people might feel the same way. But yeah, I've definitely have gone through that. I don't do that now. If I'm not fine, I can't find the words, or I can't find a good approach to explain why, I will say that. I will say, look, I'm not 100% right now, but let me just sit on how I feel in this situation, and let's pick it back up later.
Yeah,
You
it
know?
definitely sounds like you've learned a lot, not even just from this relationship with the one that got away. I
Yeah.
feel like this is the few who should not be named. This is the one that got away.
Yeah.
But also in your other relationships during that time too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit. Which one of your in-between relationships, that's what I'm going to call them, was the longest, and why did that relationship end? Right? Because I think it's so interesting that you started dating this man, and then you didn't fully end things emotionally with this man until 14 years later, but you had relationships, like real relationships,
Mm-hmm.
in between. Can you tell us about the longest one you've had, how long it was, and what was the circumstances there that led to your breakup?
Yeah. So before I jump into like the details of that, I will say that, whenever I was in a relationship with somebody else, or whenever he was in a relationship with somebody else, we didn't talk to each other, right? I think it was the occasional happy birthday text or Merry Christmas to you and your family, but we didn't stay in communication. And I think we did that specifically. Well, I know we did that specifically out of respect for their significant other, or my significant other. But so my longest relationships out my longest relationship outside of the one that got away was about for 5 years after college.
Oh,
And
that's decent.
yeah. And also after college, me and the one who got away, we we tried to have a we tried to have a hard conversation, about everything. And we decided, maybe it's best that we really try this time to go our separate ways and to make something work with somebody else. So during that time,
Oh,
yeah, so during that time also, I had zero communication. We didn't talk for a solid 5 years. And so with the relationship that I had for 5 years after college, for the most part, it really was my healthiest relationship yet. I'm gonna go into some in my head. I'm thinking right now. I feel like I'm gonna go into some tangents, so bear with me.
that's okay.
In hindsight, I now know that I was holding back how deeply I wanted to be loved with that relationship,
Mm.
in the sense that I was too mindful of my emotions. I didn't allow myself to be overwhelmed with love. And in a nutshell, I feel like I removed this idea of having that kind of love that takes your breath away, in exchange for a love that was stable and safe. Um, I and I entirely so I'll say this: I entirely don't mean that in an insulting way whatsoever to my ex. Um, so I hope it really, by the audience, it doesn't get taken that way. But life bends to the experience that that it travels through, right? You kind of have you find an ebb and flow through it. And so I sort of came to a fork in the road at that point in my life where I felt perhaps um, I had previously approached love and relationships all this time the wrong way, right? Because there was a reason why they all didn't work out. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, maybe something had to give. And I thought I had to be the one that gave into it, because like I said earlier, it's easier for me to control what I do rather than expect somebody else to do something and I think that is just an unrealistic expectation for anyone to have. And so at that particular stage in my life, it sounds silly, but I was done with the crying and I was done hurting over what felt like nonsensical things that can come from being in a relationship and from being in love. I really wanted stability, someone I could rely on to keep me grounded, and who I can have calm conversations with, to resolve conflict versus outright fighting and yelling to try to get our points across. But in the end, I think the reality was that for that particular relationship, what I came to realize after the fact is we both love differently, and we saw love differently. A bit of a tangent is I come from, and I didn't realize that this was such my scenario, my family was such a rarity until I got to college. But my Asian parents, they showered me with so much love. Like, a lot of I loves you, a lot of hugs, a lot of kisses. His family was the opposite, very stoic. I think I might have heard his parents say I love you a handful of times. Not that they didn't, they just didn't express it, right? And
Mm,
so we knew a different kind of love. And in the end, it just didn't match, right?
okay.
He is a really good guy. He just wasn't the right guy for me. And I wasn't the right girl for him, because I held myself back to match the kind of person he is and the kind of love
Mm,
that I knew he was comfortable with,
right.
you know? And he didn't ask me to do that necessarily. Essentially, um, I was guided by the reception or the lack of reception
Yeah,
of things.
that
So
makes sense.
I give, and I know that you and I have talked about this before, but I'm a natural chameleon. Like, I'm a shapeshifter, So I
Yeah.
did what I thought I needed to do to make that relationship work for as long as I did. Um, but confining a relationship into certain parameters to ensure its
Mhm.
longevity, that's not something that is fair to either of us. You just
It's
don't.
also exhausting,
It is,
right? Like
yeah.
if that's not your true self and you're kind of, shifting, after some time it gets tiring to shift, even if it's not like something bad, right? Even if it's
Right.
something as small, or I don't want to downplay it, but even if it's something as trivial, as just like adjusting the way that you receive and show love.
Hmm.
So that's actually very courageous of you to have noticed that. And
Yeah,
so
I
did you
mean,
end up leaving that relationship then when you realized what was happening?
um yeah, the ending of that was it wasn't like totally clean. I think there was a part where, he didn't feel it, I didn't feel it, but ultimately, yeah, I made the last ultimate decision that, hey, we could try to make it work. But you don't just keep a relationship because you're in one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there, you have to show up, you have to, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of the right work, and it just wasn't right. It wasn't right for either of us. um and sometimes
Along
that's what it is.
along the same lines, how did you end, or how did things end finally after this marathon? I don't even want to call it a sprint, right?
Yeah.
This marathon. You guys, it sounds like you guys went through like so many milestones, so many emotional moments that kept you guys tied. You
Mhm.
had your connections with the families. How did you make that, or how did you both come to the conclusion that you needed to not try anymore, or just really end that connection, right? Me personally, I think people come into your lives for specific reasons, and
Mhm.
some stay and some don't. But it doesn't mean that those don't stay weren't worthy. It's just
Yeah.
their time was up. So how did you know that with the one that got away?
um yeah, it was difficult getting to that realization because, again, like I said, it was always unspoken, but mutually we were each other's anchors in life for so long. And he wasn't just someone I dated and loved, he was my best friend, my emergency contact, my lifeline, all of the things, for the longest time. And I was that for him. um, and we never had a problem, picking up where we left off. But one of the things I will say is, in retrospect, we always had a problem when we did pick up where we left off. We had a problem moving beyond where we had left off. And I would say, to digress on that, what I mean is, we were never able to remove that high school sweetheart, first love lens for each other. So we were kind of stuck in high school. We
Oh,
were
okay,
stuck
okay.
in high school, right? And I think coming to that realization, 10 or whatever years later, we were like, we can't keep going at this. What what really made us move on was, a few years ago, his father passed. And he admitted that he was scared to tell me because of how it would affect me. I actually heard from his cousin. Um, I went to the funeral, I was there to support his family and everything. And we sat down and we had a conversation about, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. We really just opened up about everything. All the hard conversations that we didn't have, the honest conversations, we were finally able to have it, because I think when when you have a situation where you lose someone important in your life, you suddenly realize that you might not have time somewhere down the line in the future to have these conversations. It's either kind of like now or never, right? And so, I mean, at that point in our lives also, we moved beyond thinking that we would ever get back together, because one, he's married by this point, and
Okay.
and two, I had already found my true love. So I think we were also in a more clear mindset. While we did feel, I think we were the ones that got away from each other, and it just slipped out of us. We were so far beyond that in that time of our life, and we had the conversation where we were like, look, like you said earlier, we came into each other's lives to teach each other something, to be there for each other and everything, but we weren't meant to be the end for each other. It was just a segment in our life to really teach us. And that was the moment where, we finally understood the why, and not just
Okay.
take it for what it is, and not just take it for that, like I said earlier, because you read in the books and you see in the movies, and you kind of in your head think that this is just something that people go through, right? And
Mhm.
it's normal. But there's a reason why. And it just kind of came full circle for us. And it was really good, right? And where we are now, we don't talk on a regular basis, if at all. And I think for the past couple years, if we happen to remember, we'll shoot each other happy birthday texts. And I think, well, not even I think, I believe that for both of us, we both know that if we really, really need each other for something, we have other anchors now. I have my anchor, he has his anchor. But,
Oh, that's great.
if we need it, we know that without question, without any doubt, like we'd be there in a heartbeat. But we don't hold each other to that regard anymore, which which is a beautiful thing, and I'm very grateful for that realization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally see some comments in the chat here
Yeah.
that agree, right? Same, this viewer says, same with their first ex, that connection of familiarity, just knowing each other for so long. And actually, this specific viewer said they knew each other for 15 plus years, but they dated for 4, so
Mm-hmm.
having um, that knowledge of a person, and then also that knowledge of a person in a romantic context, that's a lot. um, Great.
Yeah.
So I wanted to throw some questions
Yeah.
from the viewers to you, if that's all right.
Of course.
Great. So the first one I have here is, have you ever had thoughts about how it was a waste of time having spent so much time with this person? Obviously your experience sounds positive, but curious if it ever came across your mind.
No, and that's not the same as it feeling exhausting, right? um
Could
yeah.
be.
It did take a lot of my energy, and it did take a lot of who I was and who I am. But I think even throughout the whole experience, I never felt that it was a waste of my time, because um, he had given me so much. He'd given me so much meaning to my life, and just to know somebody like him, like I never saw it as a waste of time. I never saw it as regret, because he's a tremendous person inside and out. And to just have had the opportunity to be connected to a person like that, and in a way that we were, no, never once crossed my mind that that was the case. And like I said, once we reached that point where we were able to understand the why behind it, it just became so much more beautiful. And for better or for worse, and through all the ups and downs and all those emotions, well worth it, you know. If
Sounds
I
like it was, sorry to cut you off. Sounds like it was
You're good.
consistently fulfilling, right? Like
Yeah.
if it wasn't, then maybe it could feel a little exhaustive and like,
Hmm.
oh, why am I putting so much effort in it?
Yeah.
But obviously something was bringing you guys back each time and you were getting something out of it.
Yeah. It wasn't one of those like it had its dynamics of why it was unhealthy, right?
Right.
But he was never the type, nor was I, to, he never left me hanging. He never left me chasing. He was, even though we avoided the hard and honest conversations, we knew we could depend on each other if we really needed to. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, I can't rely on you, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was, he was truly an anchor. And now, moving beyond that piece, I regard him as, I've always regarded him as family, but he more so is family, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. Do you think it would have worked out if everything was lined up? And that's up to your interpretation, right? I don't know what lined
Yeah.
up means. If it's
um
timing, people often say like, you might meet the right person at the wrong time.
yeah.
Hopefully not the wrong person at the right time. That doesn't make any
You
sense.
know, we've
But
we've talked about that, him and I, and we were like, maybe we were just meant for each other in a different lifetime, in a different dimension, a different whatever, right? um Maybe, or maybe not. We do have we do have our own differences. I think one of the things I will say is, we did meet very young, so that was a very affecting factor in it. Um, had I met him when I was maybe in my mid 20s, maybe my late 20s, maybe, but I can't say concretely whether or not it would or would not work.
Mhm.
But possibly.
And I think after so many years, you grow and you become different people too. So
Yeah.
what initially attracted you guys to each other when you were a sophomore in
Hmm.
high school, probably very different than what attracts you when you're like 28 to 29 in your
Yeah.
late 20s, right?
Yeah. I will say to that is, one of the things that makes me smile is, even though we've changed and evolved as individual people, our core has remained the same, meaning, family oriented, our values, our morals, dependability on each other, that has never shifted and has never changed. But yes, um, if I were to imagine it in today's, this time and place right now, like, he has a group of friends that I don't, I'm not connected with. I don't even know how to even start, um, being in that position. And likewise with me. So again, who knows? But maybe.
Great. You had mentioned that you let go of the one that got away because you also at that point found your true love,
Hmm.
right? And you knew it was your true love, so that was great. Viewer asking here, however, what would you say to those who haven't found their true love based on how you navigated? I mean, how did you know it was your true love, right?
Um, uh, that's a hard question on how. Well, it's hard, but it's hard to explain. But it's not hard feeling it. I knew he was. He is. I knew
He
he
was.
is my true love. Everything is just became easy, and easy in the sense that I don't mean you don't have to show up, and not that you don't have to put in the work, but the work becomes easy because it's something that you want to do, and the reception is there from the other partner. One of many reasons, but I think one of the main reasons why, I know very strongly that Nico is the one is, we're 3.5 years in, so in a lot of ways still a young relationship. But what was crazy was, before we even hit our 1 year mark, we signed a contract for our first house together, which is insane to me because I am a very risk adverse person. So to
I
do
feel
that was
you.
like, whoa. Um, but he's consistent. We're both consistent. You know, the same things he did from day one, he still does now. And he has completely changed for me. You know, people say I miss the honeymoon phase and I miss the things that he or she used to do. All of those things still happen today, you know. And like that's because relationships require work, and it requires for both you and your partner to show up. Not always 50-50 every single day. Sometimes it's 80-20, 90-10, 100-0. You know, if I'm completely mentally, physically depleted, you know, he picks up on that, and I the same. So, and I think also, because mine and my ex's relationship started so young, we didn't have that cognitive understanding. You know, like I said, you're going through the motions of both growing up and evolving in the relationship and figuring out things for the first time. Where I am now, like I've read a lot of books. I'm not watching Lifetime movies or whatever. You know, it's not the Notebook for me. It's an actual
Yeah.
book I've read. You know, took the time to understand what it means to be in love, what it means to be in a relationship. And my experience has allowed me to reflect on that. So I've done a lot of reflection that has gotten me to this point. So being with Nico, what I would say, let me go back to the question. What I would say is being with Nico isn't primarily the reason why I was able to let that go, but it was a catalyst.
Mm,
You know, it was a catalyst, but I also had to do a lot of work myself
that makes sense.
independently to get there. He sort of opened the door because he was able to help me see that, okay, you know, it didn't work with my ex because, you know, all those past experience prepared me to be with someone like Nico. And I say this to everybody, and I probably stand by it, but if I had met Nico earlier in my life, I don't think we would have worked. I love him to death, but he is a little needier than I probably would have stood for in my past. Not needy in a bad way. He's just very loving,
Hmm.
and I think the past me would have. And I've always been independent, but more so, you know, as I was, you know, trying to work in my career and college and all of that, right? And so I didn't always have the time to be as attentive to a relationship
Mm,
as I am now. You know, up until I was 28, um, my career being my number one was non-negotiable. Nothing came above my career. But now I'm at a place where, okay, like I'm also in the mental state that I'm preparing to start a family. I'm preparing
mm,
to lay the groundwork to be able to do that responsibly. And I recognize that there needs to be a balance. I need to be able to shut off my computer and spend quality time with my significant other, as opposed to saying, I can't do this right now. Like, I can't do this right now. I might not be able to do this tomorrow. You might have to wait 4 days. I don't know, you know? So yeah,
that's
it's,
really great.
you know, he was a catalyst, but it requires a lot of internal work too. So
Mm,
I would say spend the time, you know, spend the time just to reflecting on that. Read, write, read back on what you wrote down. Be honest with yourself. Know that it's okay to feel the way that you feel. You're definitely not alone. But that uh, for however life decides to teach us, there's a reason for everything. You know, everything happens for a reason. I know that's crazy cliche. I never believed it before, but it does. You just gotta keep working at it, and just be hopeful.
you've always got the most sage advice to leave with me, with our viewers. We are definitely at time, so I
Yeah.
would love to end on that great note there that you're leaving with us, Jasmine. Your piece around, you know, you're not alone. I think this story goes to show, right? You're sharing your story with the world. So thank you for doing that to demonstrate that this doesn't happen to just one person. And I'm so glad that you were able to meet and be prepared to meet your true love. So with that, we are at time. Appreciate everyone joining Jasmine and myself today on this Saturday afternoon. Appreciate your time, and we will catch you all next week for another segment of SAV. So have a great afternoon, evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Bye.